In our software engineering course, we contributed to open source projects. Our team developed for OctoPrint.
OctoPrint is an open source web interface for 3D printers. It allows users to remotely monitor and control their 3D printer in their web browser. OctoPrint is compatible with most commercial 3D printers and can be extended and customized to fit users' needs through its extensive plugin library.
We worked on 2 feature requests. Issue 1149, where we implemented 2 buttons that allowed users to change layers in the G-code viewer of OctoPrint, and issue 1026, where we implemented a feature to auto-uppercase G-code commands with a configurable blacklist of commands to not automatically uppercase.
To develop these features, we worked in a variety of languages and libraries. OctoPrint's backend is built utilizing the Python Flask framework. Its front end is composed of HTML, Jinja 2, JavaScript, Knockout.js, and utilizes AJAX and JSON to handle communication with the server through a REST API.
For our first feature request, we made 2 buttons that allowed users to change layers in the G-code viewer. Before the buttons, users had to use the scroll bar to change what layer they were viewing. This proved problematic in 2 ways. 1, it was difficult for the user to change only one layer at a time, especially when there were a large number of layers. Second, it was problematic for mobile users or users working on touch devices because it was very difficult to control. To fix this, we had to ensure that our buttons worked for both the standard UI and the Touch UI plugin. This feature was entirely front-end, and it was the first issue we tackled so that we could familiarize ourselves with the OctoPrint system and community. Our first step was modifying the HTML and creating a mock-up of what we envisioned the buttons looking like. Once we had made the mock-up, we were able to present it to the OctoPrint community and receive their feedback. Upon receiving approval for the button's layout, we modified the G-code view.js. We used Knockout.js to create the click binding and to enable or disable the buttons depending if there's G-code uploaded. We then used JavaScript to modify the Knockout.js variables and dynamically change the page. Once we had completed and tested our changes, we made our pull request.
The second feature we worked on is about G-code terminal commands. In OctoPrint, users can send G-code, which is a machine language, directly to the printer through a terminal on OctoPrint. If you type a G-code command with no arguments, for example G28, into the terminal page, it works whether the letter is uppercase or lowercase. Commands with multiple arguments only work if each letter is uppercase. For example, uppercase M280, P0, S150 works, but lowercase does not. One solution is to auto-uppercase the entire command. However, there is a catch. Some commands like M117 is used to send messages to the printer's display. We do not want to uppercase the entire message. To resolve this issue, first we added a new config settings, auto-uppercase blacklist in the advanced option of the serial settings tab. We included M117 as default command in the blacklist. Next, we modified the terminal send command method in the terminal.js that extracts the G-code to check against the blacklist. If there were matches, we would uppercase the G-code part only. Otherwise, we would uppercase the entire G-code command. We also updated the documentation to include the default blacklist command M117.
Delving into open source development for the first time presented a number of challenges. First, we had to understand the data flow of an entirely new environment as well as its file structure. OctoPrint is a large system with over 118,000 lines of code. We found that we had to learn the system one step at a time. First learning how the front end worked, then learning how they utilized the REST API to communicate with the server, and finally how the back end was structured. Through this step-by-step process, we were able to develop a general understanding of the system. Our second major challenge was learning new tools such as Knockout.js and how to work with new languages like G-code that we had initially no knowledge of. Our final challenge was that we had to do all of our testing with a 3D printer, which required hardware setup.
In this process, our biggest lesson was to understand the design of a large software system and how to contribute to it. We also learned how to effectively communicate with a large online community, learning how to structure well-formulated questions in order to get helpful feedback. We had to also learn new tools and software design methodologies utilized by the community. Last but not least, we learned that to successfully submit pull requests, we had to strictly follow the community's coding standards and guidelines.
From this process, we learned an enormous amount about open source development. It has given us the tools we need to continue to develop for OctoPrint as members of their community, as well as the confidence to look into open source projects that we would like to develop for.